goes up to the following situation, to a series of rooms, to 4 rooms. So each staircase serves 4 rooms, but then screens, foldable screens, can define can make 2 rooms out of 1 room out of 2, or even 1 room out of 4, so that one family could occupy 1 spiral staircase and kind of live around 1 spiral staircase, or it could be really occupied by individuals. And this is a close-up of the situation around the spiral staircase. The staircase, a kind of foldable, collapsible lobby, a bed, a desk, a chair, and a kind of bathroom also located in a grid. So I think this is really taking abstraction as far as it could go. Then the first time Leonidov himself approaches housing is in a scheme for Magnitogorsk. And really to show the difference between him and his colleagues, I want to show 2 earlier schemes or 2 other alternative schemes for Magnitogorsk. Magnitogorsk was an industrial city in the South Euro with an enormous iron ore mines and a kind of metal steel factory that was kind of developed by the Soviets, and just the kind of settlement of that area became a long series of became a very elaborate competition. And this is a project by Ginsberg and Orchitowicz, which basically consists of a road and a series of a linear building only 1 story tall, and a series of incidents that were partly related to incidents in nature that contained social services. So basically it is a road, stations in the road, then around those stations there would be collective facilities such as restaurants, schools, etc., etc. But basically each individual in this scheme would live in a room, and in an identical room with a staircase, a toilet, a bed, a desk, a chair, and 2 balconies, and with a window. And in the winter the window would be closed, and in the summer it could be open, so that you were almost living in nature. And the whole scheme consisted of an endless ribbon of these identical rooms. So basically a very anti-urban sensibility that became even more pronounced in the second version of the same scheme, where the rooms were not even arranged in a row anymore, but where they were kind of scattered and atomized in buildings such as this one, a 1-person dwelling, a 2-person dwelling or a family dwelling, and because it was obvious that bachelors could in such circumstances never find each other, would never kind of interact with each other. There would be bachelor buildings to create the required number of marriages and kind of biological connections. And here we have a kind of view of this scheme. So the constructivists really, after dealing with the city through the process you all know, in 1930 had really come to a stage where they became completely anti-urban, or anti-urban, but at least anti-urban. There's no other word for it. Kind of believed in the scattering of individuals in the landscape. And again, Leonidov, I think, really denies this contradiction between urbanity and anti-urban tendencies by creating also a linear city, but in a completely different system. This is an early version of it. The city was kind of based on a highway, and then, as you will see later, it is based on a highway here, and then a linear city that is divided in 3 linear zones. The central zone for housing, the one outer zone for cultural facilities and leisure, and another zone for pleasure activities and sports, healthy pleasures. But here we can see that he doesn't really commit himself to either high-rise or low-rise architecture or urban and anti-urban architecture, but that he simply alternates the 2. So people could live either in towers or in very low buildings, or in towers or in very low buildings. And if such a scheme seems monotonous, you have to realize or kind of imagine that it would be moving such a belt through an extremely violent and agitated landscape, and that therefore there would always be natural incidents that would give character to the different segments. And basically, both the high-rise and the low-rise elements are organized in exactly the same way. This is a plan of it. There would be a cruciform double-height space, and in the corners of that cruciform space there would be rooms. So a room for an individual, each individual would have his own room, a room with a desk and a bed and a bathroom, and so there would be 8 rooms on the first floor, and then you could take a staircase and go again to 8 floors, 8 rooms on the second floor, so that 16 people would share one of these units. And then the double height space was subdivided in a breakfast area, a greenhouse, a sports area, and an entrance area. So here we see kind of a perspective in these rooms, the double height space, the kind of gymnasium section, the lounge, the breakfast area, here in elevation, and always in the case of low-rise, kind of immediate communication with nature, and in the case of high-rise, the superb perspectives of the wild Ural Mountains. Here again, kind of this shows that the tower is simply a kind of superimposition of 6 of the low-rise houses connected by an external elevator with a little bridge leading into the same lobby. So also in terms of density, each of these sectors contains the same number of inhabitants. You have to imagine that this scheme was, the drawings of this scheme were produced in overnight, literally after 3 weeks of discussing this scheme. Leonidov said, okay, I'll go ahead, and started at 9 o'clock at night and was finished at 10 the next morning. And this this model, for instance, was drawn on a blackboard with chalk. And these objects were just taken. But I mean, you have to realize that all these things were done really under phenomenal speed. And here we have a kind of a drawing which is almost cruel in its economy. Can you focus it? Because basically all the information for the whole scheme is contained in this single drawing. Here we have a plan of the ground floor of the house, a plan of the second floor of the house, minus the void, a close-up of one of the sleeping rooms of the house, an elevation of the house, an inside elevation of the house, an isometric of the house. So basically all the information which underlies the whole scheme is given in this one single drawing, which is at the same time, as anybody can see, extremely kind of aesthetically rewarding and rich, and almost, and I think which contains latent signs of a kind of almost Chinese sensibility here. Here we have a kind of also drawn in chalk, kind of elevation. And here you see that the kind of speed got better of him, with the kind of all these towers having different vanishing points and being on different heights. But you can see that in every single aspect of Leonidov's work, there's always this kind of fantastic bonding of formalism and utilitarianism, even in the smallest details. This is a little pavilion for morning gymnastics to be shared by men and women, and it's organized in such a way. This is the ground floor. A series of lockers kind of separates men from women. There's a circular shower, but it doesn't quite separate them. There's kind of a gap here and a gap there, so that there's some possibility of tension. But anyway, so they get kind of undressed in their respective parts, and then the sexes join each other here on the ramp and kind of indulge in gymnastics again. So even the very kind of simplest and kind of most boring part of such a scheme contains all those, a long series of metaphors that doesn't in any way kind of detract from the usefulness of them. Well, And this is really the end of the lecture, kind of introducing the next part. All these schemes for Magnitogorsk were rejected by the Soviet regime. And this Magnitogorsk competition really represents the moment that the Soviet regime, which had so far supported the constructivists and almost considered them their official architects, decided that they were involved in completely nonsensical operations, and that what they needed was kind of hard-headed real functionalism, true functionalism, and summoned the kind of European leftist avant-garde, people such as Ernst May, Hans Schmidt, and Mart Stam, to come to Russia and to take things in hand. And I think that that is maybe one of the most kind of shattering and traumatic moments in the history of modern architecture, because whether they knew it or not, and it is debatable what the situation was, that act of the European specialists, so-called, was a blatant act of betrayal toward their kind of modern colleagues in Russia. And then in 1933, Frank Lloyd Wright visited Russia and kind of declared himself in favor of the academics, or at least in a euphemism, the eternal values of architecture, and that became then one of the kind of daggers that were put in the back of constructivism. Here we have Leonidov, and these are the three Wesleyan brothers, and just the kind of, I think this is the Oza group of architecture, and this is Ginsberg, who we will later see was first a teacher of Leonidov and later became his patron. This is a building by Ginsberg, from which where all the architects of the Oza group kind of met every week to discuss their magazine in this bay window. And this is a very familiar picture to all of you, no doubt. And it's extremely, but to put it in its true context, it is important to consider that that building is visible here. And I think that this image is maybe the most devastating kind of comment on the relative importance of constructivism in the socialist scene, or in the true situation in Russia. There's a planetarium here, and there is this building there, but as we will see, kind of Stalinism dominates in every possible sense. And well, here we have the two kind of juxtaposed. And this is just as a kind of promise or a kind of indication of the course Leonidov will take. After all the rectangles, after all the kind of completely rectangular aesthetics, suddenly something snaps, and this is the first example of the kind of the other phase of Leonidov, where this is a piece of furniture from 1932. Okay, thank you. Questions? Are there any questions? I would like to answer questions if there are there.
What is your next lecture? Next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday, yeah.
Yes, I should remind everybody that Rem is doing the second part of this series next Tuesday at the same time, same place. And I think it'd be best to keep the conversation maybe for after that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.